Hey guys, I'm out at the range today finally with the practical bush rifle. And I've got my optics, I've got my iron sights, and I'm going to be getting them zeroed today. So, real quick, I just want to go over, what is this practical bush rifle thing again? It's a practical, handy, general purpose rifle, that is useful out to what I would consider intermediate distance, probably 500 yards. You can see behind me kind of some of the typical terrain that I have in my region. And that's why I want to be able to shoot out to 500 yards. If you're out east and you don't hardly have anywhere where you can shoot further than say 200 or 300 yards, that would be a great benchmark for you if you were going to set something up like this. It's not a specialized fighting rifle or a precision rifle. I'm trying to avoid specialization with this rifle. It's not something that, oh, I'm going to go shoot long range. It's not something, oh, I'm going to go assault a compound. It's kind of just a general purpose rifle that, with my skill set as both a former infantryman with combat experience, rifle marksmanship instructor, long range shooter, and hunter, it's kind of a rifle that takes advantage of a lot of my skill sets personally, where I don't feel like I'm sacrificing by taking it out. And it's also being a bolt action in this case. It's something that the geese are flying north here. It's something that doesn't look too out of place amongst the common folk, so to speak. You start rolling around with ARs and chest rigs, things look a little weird because, as you're going to see, I don't really shoot much on your normal public square ranges. I typically prefer to do my shooting out actually in the bush here, and I usually try to make it get as much training value out of my time out here as possible. Now today is going to be a little different because I'm specifically dedicating this time to getting a good zero on these optics. So real quick, let's talk about the sighting systems that I'm using. Regardless of what your preferred optic is or what your preferred rifle is, your optic is what determines the use or the best use of that rifle, period. As an instructor out here and as a rifle marksmanship instructor in the Marine Corps, optics are a total game changer, compared to traditional iron sights. And you can enhance that effect even further by choosing an appropriate optic. We're living in a renaissance period right now for optics, and we are absolutely spoiled for choice. And so you might as well take advantage of that and choose an optic that best fits your situation. Okay. So the first sighting system is not really an optic, it's the iron sights themselves. And so on the top of the rifle, I've had a Skinner Scout rail. This is a Ruger American in 6.5 Grendel. And I've had a Skinner Scout rail installed, which is a 13-inch long Picatinny rail. And built into this rail is a rear aperture and an A2 front sight post. You can kind of see that here. Now, of course, these work as backup sights should an optic fail. But primarily the reason I have these on here is because I believe a rifle should have a set of sights built into it as best as possible. That way this rifle is useful, or just as useful without an optic as it is with. Now, obviously, optics are better than iron sights, period. And you're kind of a fool if you're not using an optic. But this rifle will always be useful as long as it has these irons. I can at least have it zeroed, and I'll go over what I'm going to zero it at, but I can at least have it zeroed, and it'll be useful for, general personal defense and hunting, within reason. So I like the idea of having iron sights. To me, it's kind of like having a hammer without a handle. To me, a rifle without iron sights is kind of missing something. Now this is getting into, a lot of you are going to say, well, do I need iron sights on my precision long gun, that's up to you. And I know we have very good optics nowadays, and the argument is you don't need irons because the optics are so good. And that's true. I mean, to a point, it really is. We have really good optics now. And if you're putting a quality optic on your rifle, hopefully you don't have to worry about it failing. But what I think about is not just in the next year or 2 or 5, but what about 25 years from now? I've got rifles that are older than me by a long shot that are still very accurate and very useful because they had iron sights installed on them. Now, of course, they're older than most. They weren't putting scopes on very many rifles back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. But just the same, hopefully one day this rifle will still be useful after I'm too old to pack it around. Okay. Now, the nice thing about this particular setup is I get the irons with a 13-inch sight radius, but I've also got this long Picatinny rail. And with it, I can put on, just like on an AR-15 or anything else with a Picatinny rail, I can put a lot of different optics on here. Of course, I could just leave it as irons. To me, that would be kind of, I don't know if I would do that. At a minimum, I would put a red dot sight on it, and you might as well take advantage of that. You could put some sort of prism optic on, like an ACOG, or one of the primary arms fixed power prism sights. Of course, we can put what I call a conventional scope on, which would be your rearward mounted scope, or you can even put a long eye relief scope on, in similar to the scout rifles that Colonel Jeff Cooper described. The next optic, I kind of like my stuff to work as systems. So I have the rifle, it has sights built into it. If they were zeroed right now, I could pack this rifle off into the woods and go do my thing. This is what I call a conventional scope. And I've got it mounted in a set of quick detach worn scope rings. And this is a 2.5 to 10 primary arms gold line GLX optic with the ACSS Griffin Mill reticle. I've had this scope for a couple years now. I shot my close to 300-pound mule deer with this rifle and this scope last fall. It's a proven piece of equipment for me. I've had it out in rainstorms and snowstorms and beaten it off the back of my pack. I'm not real gentle on my stuff. And so this is a great optic for if I'm more worried about accuracy and taking full advantage of this rifle at distance. This is an awesome scope for that. It is a bit on the heavy side compared to other options, at least. It's about 22.5 ounces without the rings. And so to me, I'm all about trying to cut weight, because not just are we worried about carrying a rifle, but our sustainment gear, our survival gear, all that stuff, our water, our food, it all has weight. And so if I'm not worried about making a precision shot with this optic, maybe I don't want to carry this extra weight around. Okay. Now, I think all your magnified optics, for me, like I said, I want to shoot at 500 yards max with this rifle. And so I need an optic that has between 1 to 1.5 power per 100 yards that I want to shoot. So at a minimum, I want a 5 power. And, 5.5 or 1.5 times of that is, 7.5. So somewhere in that 7 power range is what I'm looking at for maximum power. Okay. Because that's going to help me identify targets and hit them at distance. Because it's one thing to come out on a range and shoot at longer distance when it's, when the targets are painted bright white and they're obvious and easy to see. When the target's trying not to get shot, it's very difficult to see that. And having a little extra magnification, like I said, in that 1.5 times per 100 yards, helps us to identify that target. But that doesn't mean we go to the extreme and say, well, to hell with 1.5 times per, what about 2 or 3 times per 100 yards? Now we're packing around a full-blown precision rifle scope when the rifle's really just supposed to be a general purpose rifle, okay? So that's why I kind of limit it to that 1.5. Now, granted, this is a 2.5 to 10 because I felt the extra, I'm not so worried about the extra magnification, but the other features of this scope and the fact that it is fairly compact and lightweight do allow me to take full advantage of this rifle. You know, I have very good turrets. The GLX turrets are awesome. The ACSS reticles are awesome. And so I do have a little bit of extra magnification on the top end at 10 power. I can say when I shot my deer, he was about 225 yards away, and I'm pretty sure I was on about 6 power. So take that for what it is. You know, that's the beautiful thing about a first focal plane reticle is you just adjust it, and whatever looks good to your eye, that's what you shoot at. You know, another nice thing about the ACSS reticles in general is that at low power, they're just as useful for close range work as they typically are for longer range work. And so on a general purpose rifle, that's great because I can engage targets closely with relative ease, or I can shoot at longer distance with relative ease as well. You know, with the Griffin mill reticle, it's a milling grid, like a Christmas tree style reticle. And of course I've got matching mill turrets. And so that with that combination and appropriate ballistic data, I can shoot very accurately to the max potential of this gun. You know, you can probably tell right now it's windy. This is not an uncommon condition where I live. So being able to accurately dial for wind and also observe holdovers at distances and corrections and quickly make those corrections to engage is important. You know, a lot of shooting in the wind is missing sometimes, and being able to spot that miss, spot that splash, and make that quick adjustment before the wind changes is very important. A lot of the guys right behind me back over here is our target detection and engagement range that we use at the Fieldcraft and Bush Tactics courses. And, you know, sometimes we shoot whether it's windy or not, and so different classes have got to learn the effects of wind on their rounds and see it at distance. You know, one thing with this particular scope, it's a 44 millimeter objective and a 30 millimeter tube, so it's going to have good low light light transmission through the scope, which is important for hunting and things, you know, detecting those targets and seeing those targets in low light. You know, so the main reasons I would pick this scope to run on this rifle is if I was hunting or otherwise wanted to take full advantage of the long range capabilities of this rifle. Anytime you're going out to shoot something at long distance, that's that's when we're starting to get more into specific use. And so that if I want to use this rifle in a more specific role, I would probably take this optic. The other optic I've got out here today is this Hi-Lux 2-7. Now, Hi-Lux is kind of an interesting brand. I think they do deliver pretty good quality for the price. I bought one of their CMR 1-4s about 13 years ago, and I ran it on my kind of go-to AR for a long time until I replaced that optic with the Primary Arms Platinum 1-8. And there was no reason for me to change it out. It's not like the scope was broken. So I think they do deliver a good value. This is their 2-7 by 32 LER, and it is a long eye relief scope, which means it's going to ride further, and so it requires more eye relief. Now, this is a bit of an experiment because I'm not a big, I haven't done much, I haven't done any work at all really with the Scout rifle, but so many of Colonel Cooper's writings, and if you haven't had a chance to check them out, I've got some of them up on my blog, and I would encourage you to do that. So much of what he's written has been accurate and true and has been trained by professionals for many, many years. And his Scout rifle concept is very similar. My practical bush rifle concept is very similar to his Scout rifle concept in wanting to equip a rifleman out in the wilderness with an effective and lightweight general purpose rifle. And so I thought, you know, as inexpensive as these scopes are, it would be worth getting one so that I can kind of evaluate the concept for myself for my own uses. And I plan on documenting that as well. This won't be a comparison trying to necessarily disprove his concept or anything like that. It's just I'm going to evaluate this for myself to see if it's something that I can use, because I'm all about, you know, general purpose rifles in the backcountry. So this 2-7 Hi-Lux is a 1-inch tube with a 32 millimeter objective, so it does have less light gathering, but it's half the weight of the primary arms. The primary arms is 22 ounces. This is 10 ounces, you know, not counting the rings on either of them. And so this is a much lighter weight scope, and being mounted forward like this, it changes the balance of the rifle. I don't know, it just packs differently. That's the best way to describe it at the moment. And just having dry fired with this scope on, what having that long eye relief scope does is, instead of having the scope way up close to our eye, kind of blocking a lot of the vision. Of course, it's magnified and we can see through the scope, but at close range, a lot of my peripherals cut out. Where with the long eye relief, it's more like this. And so I can still see a considerable amount around the scope, so to speak. Almost similar, when this is on 2-power, it's about the same as a red dot as far as what you can see. So if you've ever if you know the difference between a red dot and a conventional scope, you'll understand what I'm talking about there. And having it down on 2-power, it does give you just a hair of magnification. Now the reticle in this is what they call their 308 BDC. So it's a BDC calibrated for 308. The nice thing about the 6.5 Grendel is ballistically, it's very similar to the 308 Winchester. And I've calculated the ballistics on this and on that reticle, and I will be zeroing this at a distance so that I can still use the BDC in it. One of the other things I'll be doing is evaluating the return to zero capabilities of these worn QD rings on this rail, because, like I said, this is a system, and I want to be able to pick and choose based off what I'm doing. Like I said, the optic determines the best use for the rifle, but ultimately my goals and the reason that I'm out doing whatever it is that I'm doing will determine what optic I pick, so that I can best put the rifle to use. Now, this is a second focal plane optic, which means, you know, as I'm changing magnification, the reticle stays the same size. So the BDC reticle is only on 7 powers where it's designed to be used. It doesn't mean I can't calculate at other magnifications what the holdovers will be, and I'll end up doing that after I zero it. But it is designed to be used at max magnification, which is typically, you know, 7 powers not that high anyways compared to some scopes. And if I was shooting at 400 or 500 yards, I would crank it up to 7 power. The scope itself looks like a well-made scope. I see that it's, you know, it's got a sticker on the bottom. It says it's made in China, but otherwise it looks like a well-made scope to me. The glass is clear. You know, considering the fact that I paid under $200 for this optic, but just looking at it right now, it's completely useful out here in the field. Now, low light transmission, it will be interesting to see kind of how this does compared to the conventional scope. Okay guys, so that's kind of the end of the video, but I wanted to do a quick summary because I didn't have every kind of optic out there the day I was at the range. So I just kind of wanted to summarize my thoughts on some of the more common optics. You could put any one of these on a practical bush rifle and it would be correct. It just all depends on your intended use. You know, so for me, the LPVO is still kind of the best all-around optic we can get. They're available with a very versatile magnification range. You know, you can dial them down to 1 power and use them similarly to a red dot sight, or you can dial up the magnification, and depending on the brand and the optics and the reticle, you can do a lot of things with those, whether they're BDCs or milling reticles. Of course, there's turret options if you want to dial. One thing I like about the LPVO is it doesn't rely on a battery. A lot of them have illumination, but they also have an etched reticle so that no matter what, you always have something to aim with. And of course, with the LPVOs, right now we are spoiled for choice with those. So for the red dot sight, for me, the only place for a red dot in my toolkit, so to speak, is for something I want to use up close. That's the only use for a red dot, in my opinion. That's what they were designed for, and that's what they're great at. Now, of course, the major hindrance there is they have no magnification. And I don't think most of them have an etched reticle. Now, of course, I am not an expert on every red dot sight out there. Most of them are battery powered. I know Trigicon has, you know, their solar powered ones, and Hollow Sun. So, of course, that's options. But they are super lightweight. You know, if you want to keep the rifle super lightweight and you're not necessarily worried about shooting any further than, say, 100 to 200 yards, I think a red dot's a good option. You know, like I said, they're super fast up close, and once again, many options to choose from. Moving on to the conventional scope, it has the most magnification out of all the optics typically. Once again, lots of options on the market, take your pick. Now, with the Skinner Scout Rail with its built-in A2 front sight post, it's harder to mount. With that bigger objective bell and the 30mm tube, it's a little bit trickier to get things to line up, but it is possible. Now, of course, there's lots of other conventional style scopes that might be easier, you know, if they have a 1-inch tube or maybe a smaller objective bell, whatever the case may be. Now, in my use, this was the heaviest optic of the 4 that I've got pictured here. And so it's not much heavier than the LPVO. That's the thing with LPVOs. They're not super lightweight either. Now, some of them are. There's always exceptions. And then moving on to the long eye relief or the Scout scope, you know, they typically have either a fixed low power magnification, like somewhere to 2 to 3 power, or they have adjustable magnification going up to, you know, 5, 6, 7 power. This particular one is very lightweight at 10 ounces. It requires, you know, the problem with using a long eye relief optic on a rifle is that it requires a special mount. You know, I had to have the Skinner Scout Rail installed, and if you want to do something like this, you're going to have to figure out a way to get one mounted to your rifle. A normal scope base is not going to work. And then finally, the options are very limited, and I think that's the number one, that's the Achilles heel of the Scout rifle concept, is that there are very few high quality optics being currently manufactured that are available for it. I know there's been other high quality options made in the past that you can always get on the secondhand market, but I'm looking at what's available now, and there's just really not that much. Now, when it's on low power, it's very similar to a red dot sight in your sight picture and how well it aims and points and how quick it is. So I think it has a lot of versatility, similar to the LPVO, but also it's also lighter than a lot of LPVOs. So that's something to think about. So anyways, I appreciate you guys watching another one of my videos. And of course, I'm always interested in your guys' thoughts and comments and experiences. So please feel free to subscribe and comment, shoot me an email, whatever you want to do. Thanks again.